And you know, I hear you, but I think that this brings us to the next topic, which is on the next slide. Why does change hurt? And I mean, right there, you've kind of mastered one of those, and that is change hurts because it can kill people. It can when you don't change in a good way, and you kind of adopt. Let's say we adopt this new content management methodology kind of way of thinking, but we use old practices and old tools. We're not going to get to where we want to go. So we have to change kind of everything, our whole paradigm, how we think about it. So can you talk about kind of why it hurts and what is the pain of change?
Certainly. Well, I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to go into the human psychological reasons for resisting change. But I think in this particular situation, it's difficult because it messes with your mastery of your craft. A lot of people have spent a great deal of time and effort in becoming good at what they do. And very often they've had to do it within the context of dysfunctional systems. And they've found all these clever workarounds, and they've shared them with their colleagues, and they've gained respect and credibility through using these workarounds. And it's very difficult to let something go that you've worked very hard to get, particularly if it's unclear what you'll get in return. Vendors don't like to talk about it.
Oh, no.
Because they're worried that they'll scare you away and that will lose them their sale. Consultants don't like to talk about it in other than rather general terms, and again, it's in nobody's best interest to scare people away, to say, well, you know what, let's just wait until you guys have it all sorted out, and then 3 years from now maybe come back and we'll try content management, because particularly consultants are very aware of the fact that it's extremely necessary, and that the fact that it's going to hurt a little shouldn't stop people from doing it.
It's a paradigm shift, and I know you don't like that word because we've talked about this before, but it is a paradigm shift. It creates the need for people to think outside the box. They have to rethink how they do their jobs. They have to rethink their place in the organization. They have to rethink whether the organization is really even relevant.
Right. I have a fabulous example there that really puts it in perspective, I think, and it also has to do with document production, incidentally. Back in the Middle Ages, a fellow by the name of Gutenberg decided that he had this idea about printing, and he hired an assistant, a former master forger of woodcut engravings, to help him carve his printing blocks. And once the first 20 Gutenberg Bibles came off the press, the assistant wanted Gutenberg to explain to him, to point out to him which one was the original. And Gutenberg, I can just see it, kind of smiled and said, well, they're all originals. And the master said, they can't all be originals. That's fraudulent. You can't pass them off as all originals. One has to be the original, and the others are copies. Because I used to make my money selling copies of things and passing them off as originals. Now, I've reformed. You can't go around doing the same thing, passing off these 10, 20 Bibles as original Bibles. They can't be. There is an original somewhere. There has to be an original somewhere. Anyway, they parted ways because the master forger, who was now reformed, was absolutely convinced that Gutenberg was a huge scam artist and that he didn't want to have anything to do with him. So Gutenberg's the paradigm shift as a result of the printing press was just too alien. Nobody could, and certainly this fellow, just couldn't wrap his mind around it. So the concept of content management and what it means for information distribution, I think, requires a similar paradigm shift. And you actually pointed out a very good book that talks about this, and it's a book called Document Engineering by two fellows named Bob Glushko and Tim McGraw. Now, Tim McGraw is always easy to remember because he's a country star.
Yes, not that Tim McGraw.
Okay, fair enough. But it's a book that really goes into explaining the need to completely redefine the term document. A document could be many things, not just paper with ink on it. It could be a video screen. It could be a sound file. It could be all sorts of things. And the book really gives a very good a good explanation of that, and it will help you shift kind of the box that you're thinking in.
I agree with you, and I will do a little plug for this book just because I want to tell the audience it is a harder read than some books because it requires you to kind of think outside the box and travel along with them. Although both Glusko and McGrath are very good at explaining what they're trying to communicate to you. The book is called Document Engineering. The subtitle is Analyzing and Designing Documents for Business Informatics and Web Services. And I highly recommend it. It will challenge the way that you think about what your role is and what you're really, what your future may be. You may be a future document engineer. But let's go back to change here.
So, on a more positive note, I don't want, again, people to think that, oh my God, this change is such a heavy topic and we're just going to get horribly depressed. As a species, we've done nothing but adapt to change. If we didn't, we'd still be living in caves. But we do it so gradually that we don't really notice how much we're changing. The thing with introducing something like a content management system is that suddenly it's very rapid change. We don't have time for you to catch up. You need to jump in here and go with the flow, learn as you go along, and as a result, you're going to have to change not just your concepts, but, and this is where it gets kind of difficult, you need to change behavior, and you need to change behaviors that are sometimes very much ingrained and very much the kind of behavior that for the longest time have earned you kudos and bonuses and rewards from your employer. And now your employer is telling you, I know you used to do that, and we really appreciated you doing it, but we don't want you to do that anymore. We want you to do something different. So it's rapid change, and it's not evolutionary change. This is revolutionary change. And that's just because the time frame in which the change has to take place is so compressed. That's where the problems arise. And it's because people generally tend to underestimate the emotional impact of that, the power and the strength of the emotional response to change catches management by surprise.
Well, and there's a question from Arjuna in Oxford who asked, it's always going to be so hard. This whole thing seems complex. Will change eventually get easier? And I guess my answer to that, and I would love to hear your take on it too, is that this is kind of the change we're talking about is a major change in the way that the world, all the organizations in the world are starting to think about their content and how it might become more valuable if it were able to be shared amongst other organizations. It's kind of the game-changing thing you talked about earlier, just like the Internet. The Internet changed business, and this kind of change has the power, in my view, to change the way businesses organize, create, manage, deliver information in big ways. And so my answer is it's going to be hard for a little while because this change asks us to think differently. And
exactly.
In the future, though, it should become old hat as students come cranked out of school, ready to do Web 2.0 kind of work, and in this very Web 1.0 environment that we still find ourselves in. What do you think about Arjuna's question?
Well, I think it's a great question, and I'd like to respond with a quote from a German philosopher. And they're all good for everything, right? But this German philosopher said, "Technology is everything we didn't grow up with." Now, for me, when I first started out exploring the Internet, it was strange and odd, and I didn't quite know what to make sense of it, and I certainly couldn't quite understand how it would apply to my work. My 12-year-old grandson on the other side, he doesn't even think of it as technology. It's just, as I used to would go to a library and look into a book, he just says, "Oh, it's okay, I'll just Google it." And it's completely normal to him. And so that's how change generally happens. The people first involved with it will have to do a little bit of struggle, but the people who come after, for them it becomes normal. And it isn't a change anymore. So yes, change does become easier. And as the familiarity with the impact and the consequences of the change increases, people will go like, you know what, this wasn't really all that hard at all. Yeah, it was a bit of a rough start, but it gets easier. What happens if the company prepares for the change?
I think you made a good point about that. And so let's move to the next topic, because I think there's a great segue here.